So I'll be posting this to YouTube as well, if all goes well. Um, haven't gone live before, so hopefully everything is going well. Um, I just figured out that my the last few TikToks that I did, I accidentally swiped, and so it changed my filter. And I thought, oh no, people are going to think that I'm trying to look pretty or something like that, and figured that out and switched it back to normal. Um, but wanted to do something here where I've got a little bit more time to talk, more so than a 60-second TikTok where you can't really convey a whole bunch of information. Also, having a hard time seeing. Hey, Stacy. Um, but I guess the kind of the gist of it is going to be who is it that we're up against? What is going on in the world? How can we make sense of their motivations? And again, I'm going to preface it by saying I do not have all the answers. There's a lot of people that are very well versed in these things, and I try to stay up to speed and learn from them. I only know so much, but it's hard to really grasp what's going on in the world when you don't know who runs it and what their motivations are. And so I think a good place to start is previous rulers all throughout history. Um, I had heard this in school, and so did my mom. She was telling me this. She had a professor that was telling her that uh, the oh, thank you, Stacy. Nice of you to say. Um, I'm also welcoming a lot of info from many of you because again, I don't have all the info. But if you've got anything to add to it, sorry if I don't see your comments. But again, jump on YouTube when I put this up there, and try to. I always forget to enable comments on there, but I'll try to remember to do that, and then you can um, chime in there, and hopefully we can put our heads together and figure these things out a little bit more. But anyway, my mom, she was telling me how she had I believe it was a college professor who was a history professor too. She was talking about these rulers throughout history who thought they were gods and the people thought they were gods. And I was kind of wondering about that. Like, how do you believe that a human being is actually God? Um, and I had heard the same. Pharaohs were thought to be gods. Rulers of ancient Chinese dynasties were thought to be gods and believed themselves to be gods. And that's not just like a figure of speech or something that they're um, necessarily using to manipulate the people. Probably that to an extent as well. But it's also, I believe, an authentic belief that they have. And it goes back to these these secret societies and what really binds them and unites them. So, to understand that, because those belief systems, because those secret societies go back so far, all the way back to arguably before, but that gets into some difficult things. But back to the line of Cain. Cain, for example, biblically, like Cain and Abel Cain, after he was kicked out of family unit, I guess, um, he and his people, his progeny, were builders of cities. And what are the Masons? The Masons are builders. So we have that connection. Um, but, and again, you don't have to believe in ancient origin stories, but they do. So now they've got their own Gnostic spin on it, but essentially it's this. And I'll give you the Old Testament version, and we're going to see that that is mirrored in many other belief systems as well. There's different spins on the very same thing. Um, you talk to many Christians, and they will probably have a different narrative of Genesis 6. It goes back to that phrasing B'nai Ha-Elohim, which means sons of God. People who are proponents of the Sethite view say that the sons of God meant the godly line of Seth, because Adam and Eve gave birth to Cain, Abel, Seth, and the sons of evil really were the line of Cain. But that's not how to interpret it, I don't think, because elsewhere in the Bible, B'nai Ha-Elohim, sons of God, is always a reference to angels, to angelic beings. So when Genesis 6 says that the sons of God came to mate with the daughters of man, what it's saying is, in my opinion, is that fallen angels came to mate with human women who then gave birth to this human angel hybrid progeny, which are known as the Nephilim, which were the giants back in those days. I think another thing that traditionalists would have to argue is, or they'd have to explain, where do these giants come from? Where do the Nephilim come from? If we're talking about just the sons of Seth having sex with the daughters of Cain, or rather vice versa, I guess it would be sons of Cain. No, it'd be sons of Seth um, intermingling with the human. Well, they'd both be human from that perspective. Women of Cain. Um, so what we're seeing is, if you interpret it that way, we have fallen angels coming down to mingle with human women, creating these hybrids. Um, Extra biblical texts like the Book of Enoch tend to corroborate that. Now, that's another argument that a lot of people have, is that Enoch is not canon. That's not biblical canon. It can't be relied on. I find it interesting, though, that the Bible refers to the Book of Enoch and makes reference to it. So the Bible itself ascribes authority to the Book of Enoch. Here's where we may not be able to buy hook, line, and sinker into everything that the Book of Enoch has to say, because it does look like there may have been opportunities for corruption to have infiltrated the text. However, the Book of Enoch is still canon in the Church of Ethiopia. Nonetheless, the things that I'm talking about don't contradict biblical scripture at all. What the Book of Enoch does really is just expands on the biblical narrative. And it says that 200 watchers, those would be the fallen angels, descended, landed on Mount Hermon, and decided to intentionally made a decision to intermingle with the human women. So it wasn't, it does say they lusted after the women, but also what we get from that text is a deliberate decision to mingle with the women. So essentially to pollute the human genome. And so from the start, what we have is the desire for the human genome to be bred out. We have this essentially a spiritual battle between these angelic beings that were angry at God for creating human beings, and they're the anti-human force. They want to breed out humanity. That's their motivation. They want to corrupt human DNA. That's how they're going to do it. And then you have the creator God who made humans to be a part of his family saying, no, that's not going to happen. And we see this in verses also in Genesis where God is talking to the serpent and saying, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. Well, I know what Eve's offspring is. That's us. We're human beings. But what are the serpent's offspring? And a brief look into that interpretation of Genesis 6 shows us that that offspring would be the Nephilim. Now, having said that, I know it's kind of far out there, but like I said, this is echoed throughout origin stories all over the place. I'm going to read from, I don't know if you ever heard of this book. If not, you should get familiar with it. It's probably the most I've got bookmarks all over the place on this thing, but The Genesis 6 Conspiracy by Gary Wayne. It's very thick. It's like 800 pages. I think the last 100 pages, almost 800, um, are all bibliography and footnotes. It took him 30 years to do this research. Probably one of the most comprehensive documents you're going to find in this kind of a realm. But he writes that Sumerian legends are employed today to discredit biblical accounts. Sumerian legends are overtly utilized because they predate any current biblical records, even though this does not prove they are the source documents for the Bible. Frankly, the Sumerian tablets are merely older surviving records and nothing more. And as far as those go, this is where we get the idea of Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are just, that is interchangeable with Nephilim. It's a different spin on it. However, Dr. Michael Heiser's critique of Zecharia Sitchin's interpretation of those ancient Sumerian tablets is that he really did not do a good job. And this is Heiser's arena, so he would know. I tend to trust his opinion a little bit more. Not that Sitchin got it all wrong, but that he took some license and some liberties to fill in gaps where he wasn't really sure of the interpretation. And so, but nonetheless, very much of that Sumerian lore is the same as what we see in the New Testament. Let's see here. So part of that is this too. I should expand. So after these Nephilim were created, a lot of chaos ensued on the earth, and things got very wicked. These were not just like happy little giants; they were bloodthirsty, cannibalistic, rapist, very evil, and this does tie into these secret societies as we progress here. But so that was the justification for the flood. It wasn't necessarily that man himself became so sinful that God said, "Well, I'm going to kill them all." It was more because the things got sinful, but it was more that the violence and evil and debauchery of these Nephilim, these human god hybrids, which you find echoed throughout Greek mythology, Sumerian, all these. We'll get into it, but they became so wicked that everything had to be destroyed, and so that's why the deluge came, wiping out all of the tainted genome to save humanity in its pure form. Says that Noah and his family, Noah specifically was righteous in his generations. Well, that could be interpreted as not that Noah was righteous. We know that Noah got pissed drunk after that ark landed, which is said elsewhere in Scripture is that drunkenness is a sin. Not drinking, but drunkenness. You don't want to do that. So he didn't seem to be righteous in that manner, but he was righteous in his generations. Maybe meaning he was righteous in his genealogy. Maybe his bloodline wasn't tainted. So that is where we have this deluge come in. Historian Wise Bauer noted that even though science has documented many global catastrophes, only the deluge resonates down the ages in all cultures. At some point, water threatened man's fragile existence. She further noted historians cannot ignore the flood, as it is the closest universal story the human race has. In addition, legends from the subcontinent of India reveal that a phallus of heaven inexplicably reached out to a young girl, his earth daughter. An act of union was completed between heaven, father, and earth, mother, that produced the giants. So we see the same thing in Indian lore. Hindu legends further record that an ancient race of giants known as the Daitya, Daitya, I don't know if I'm going to be saying these things right. They were the offspring of the goddess Diti and the god Asyapa. The Asuras are remembered in the Vedas as demigods. Asuras were analogous with the Danau from another Hindu myth, which recorded that these too were giants, and like the Daitya, the Danua made war with the gods and were defeated. These legends are exactly the same as Mediterranean legends, and they all base their mythology on the biblically recorded events. Central and South American religions contain many creator gods, from the diverse cultures and nations who are all considered to be the same god by many, Quetzalcoatl, Contiki, Votan, Thinupa, and Viracocha. The creation epic of the Incas concerning Viracocha contains records of Viracocha creating giants from stone. These giants were benevolent and judicious at first, but later they became corrupted and violent and began to make war, just as in the Egyptian and Atlantean legends. Humanity became cruel, vitriolic, barbaric, murderous. They were so enthralled with stealing and making war that they began to ignore the gods. Finally, though, because of the violence and wars, a great flood destroyed humanity. Viracocha decided humankind was no longer good enough. He destroyed all but two brothers and their families, whom he forewarned that they could take refuge atop a great mountain. In fact, Ignatius Donnelly believed a great part of Central American antediluvian history pertains to the activities of a race of giants known as the Quinames, or Kinamis, something like that. The evidence just seems to go on and on. Chinese farming cultures recorded a terrible warlord ripped holes in the sky canopy, drowning the people of the earth, except for one noble queen and a small band of warriors who took refuge upon a mountaintop. Other Chinese legends recorded a Hui Yuhi, something like that, escaping the flood with his wife, three sons, and three daughters. You start to see some trends emerge here. And again, this is the Genesis 6 conspiracy for any of you wondering. Taiwanese accounts in the early 20th century CE say that a great flood that engulfed all of humankind and a surviving remnant that fled to mountaintops or escaped on a boat. In Australian mythology, there were the Nurum. That's tough. If there's any Australians out here can help me out with this. Nurumbungutias came from the sky. They lived on Earth with humanity. Again, the same thing. We could call them extraterrestrial. I'm not trying to put a picture of alien grays in your mind, but beings, angelic beings, spirit beings, in many cases with these kinds of narratives, came from the sky or space down to essentially mingle with humanity in order to create a part human, part not human hybrid progeny. So these, the N word, not that N word, the N word that I can't pronounce, Nurembungutias, came from the sky. They lived on Earth with humanity. They were a very advanced race of people that ruled over the Earth until the sea rose up one day, creating a great flood and drowning most of the spirit people. Although some escaped back to heaven, once more the Australian myth is eerily close to biblical, Atlantean, Greek, Mesopotamian, Indian, Chinese, and American mythology. This is particularly so when you consider that many Australian legends contain the Rainbow Covenant as part of the mythology, as do Mayan and Hawaiian legends. The North American tribe of Arikara, too, remembers a similar legend. In the beginning, the great sky chief Nishano created giants, but after a time, the giants had no respect for their maker. In variant versions, the great sky spirit Nesaru destroyed that scurrilous race of giants with a great flood, but of course he saved some humans from this destruction to repopulate the earth. In a similar fashion, the Hopi remembered the same tradition, but with more direct connections to the Atlantean account. The Hopi claimed their ancestors were reared by the Great Snake Clan. Now, whenever they say Snake Clan or these Snake Brotherhoods, that is a reference to the oldest versions of these secret societies. This is what Wayne writes, which again, Genesis 6 Conspiracy, a book that I would highly recommend. These snake brotherhoods believed that they are part of that angel human progeny. They've got the blood of the gods running through their veins. Hence, the pharaohs being gods, because they were the progeny of these Nephilim. A lot of these secret societies believe that they believe in Atlantis. Plato did too. Plato wrote about it extensively, saying that it was not a mythological land, but rather an actual place. And who ruled over Atlantis? Well, it was 10 giant kings. They have 5 groups of twins who were born of the gods, and I don't know specifics of this, so I don't want to botch it, but essentially, again, you have that same structure of gods having intercourse with human women, producing these giant beings. So um, even in the founding of this country, that movement, I think that was part of the Masonic movement. I believe it was Manly P. Hall who said this, is that they wanted to name America New Atlantis, which would be reflected, I think, in the architecture in Washington, D.C. When you look at the obelisk, the domed Capitol, um, and I'll just give a brief overview of that. So, in Egyptian mythology, and these secret societies are all obsessed with Egyptian Babylonian mystery religion, which is why we have that pyramid with the missing capstone and the what I would call the Eye of Horus on the top of the capstone there. But um, so Osiris and Isis, this is Egyptian mythology. We had those two. Osiris gets chopped up into 14 pieces. The 14th piece, his phallus, was thrown into the Nile, swallowed by a fish. Isis tried to put them back together, found everything except for the phallus. So she made one, did a magical incantation over it, kind of stuck it on there, I guess. I don't know. And then just had a little seed on there and impregnated herself with Horus, who would be the reincarnation of Osiris, as I understand it. Okay. So, what we see in Egyptian architecture is a reflection of their belief system. So that obelisk is a representation of Osiris's phallus, and the domed Capitol building we see in Washington D.C. would represent the womb of Isis. So you usually see this phallus obelisk somewhere in the vicinity of a domed structure of some kind. We see the same thing at St. Peter's Basilica. We see the monument-looking thing with the dome. We see the same thing in London. It's occult archaeology, and so um, secret societies go back. Blah blah blah. I wrote some notes down to try to keep this as cohesive as I can, but it goes all over the place and um, may be difficult to follow. Hopefully not. But when you see things like Bush and Kerry emerging from the same secret society, they both came from Skull and Bones, which is a secret society, or at least an installation of that secret society is at Yale, and it may be elsewhere as well. But they both emerged from that. So we have Bush and Kerry both running against each other in the same presidential election, both coming from the same secret society. And so the saying goes, generally speaking, our officials are selected, not elected. Now, if that's not true, then Bush and Kerry coming out of the same secret society is a mighty coincidence. So, what really drives them? I think more than anything is the belief that they are gods. Um, I think another part of it is this idea of Gnosticism kind of is woven throughout these secret societies. So having special knowledge and being special because you have special knowledge. Gnostic being reference to gnosis, gnosis meaning knowledge. And so if you go back to the Enochian account, we have these fallen angels bestowing upon man their knowledge. That's where we get these, if you've ever heard of the seven sacred sciences, that's where that comes. So these are the keepers of occult knowledge that no one else is privy to, but they are because they're special and everyone else is cattle. Um, so at the highest order of masonry is a belief in Lucifer. I'm not saying that. That's what Albert Pike is saying. Albert Pike is an old Grandmaster Freemason. He wrote freely about this. And that's what he says. Lucifer would be the light bearer. That's what his name means. So he's a bringer of light. He's a bringer of enlightenment. He enlightened man and freed man from an oppressive God. Whereas the alternative to that would be the view I subscribe to is that that's how he came across because he would be the author of Deception. However, what he really did was try to usurp the human genome and create his own pervert. He can't create himself. He's not a creative deity. He is a created deity. He's a cherub, actually. Um, Trying to usurp God's creation and pervert it. That's what he does because, again, not a creative deity. All he can do is pervert the creation that's already there. That was the real objective. And these people have bought the lie that they're special. And that's a really, that's a deceptive fallacy to believe that you're unique, you're better, you're above the rest, and you get to do what you want. Everyone else is cattle. You can lie to them, you can cheat, you can steal. Um, it's that Aleister Crowleyan "do what thou wilt" theology. If you've ever seen like Jay-Z wearing that shirt, "do what thou wilt," that comes from Aleister Crowley, um, renowned occultist, wrote about ideal child sacrifice and called himself the Beast. 666 was his name for himself. And he really permeates um, culture deeply. It was Jimmy Page or Robert Plant, I can't remember. One of the guys from Led Zeppelin bought his old house near the lock, as I understand it. Again, have not verified that, haven't been there. But I do know that the likeness of Aleister Crowley is on the Beatles album. What album is that? Is that the Sergeant Pepper one? I'm not sure. Somebody on here probably knows. Oh, Max Shine says Jimmy Page did. That's who I thought it was. Also, of course, we have Crowley referenced in music, uh, Black Sabbath, and a number of others. So he's this rather renowned figure. That Crowleyan "do what thou wilt" runs antithetical to, um, rein it in and subjugate yourself, practice self-control. Of course, "do what thou wilt" is much more attractive. I've lived both ways, to be honest, and I can tell you that the "do what thou wilt" does not work. It doesn't work. It doesn't make you more happy. Just feed your to feed your impulses takes away from your happiness, and to regulate them actually increases it. And that's something I know firsthand. So these people have gotten themselves into this narrative that they're special, they're the kings of the earth, that God blood runs through them. And if you want a more, I guess, vivid accounting of that, we see this in the Nazi SS, in their belief system. These were eugenicists, essentially, who believed in purifying the human race, which really meant creating the Ubermensch. So this is a Nietzschean philosophy, creating the ultimate human being. And that's what they were after. So that's what the Aryan race is. Aryans, um, as I understand it, are really um, a essentially, I would say, if you use the Old Testament terminology, they would be Nephilim descendants. So they wanted to recreate this Ubermensch, or this superhuman version, which is not really human. And so they had to kill the Jews, coincidentally identified as God's chosen in Old Testament scripture. So that just kind of went along with it. But the same thrust is there, and it's here now too. That's what we're getting onto. Um, so let's see. We have the seven sacred sciences kind of touched on. That's I would read this book if you want more on that. Um, here's here's an interesting, I think, tangent I can go on. Now, as far as these Nephilim, there are a number. Oh, did I highlight it in here? Maybe I did. Um, there are modern accountings of just hints of this being a part of our history, and it's kind of gone from the public eye now. But even as far back as Abraham Lincoln, which was just in 1848. Looks like he visited Niagara Falls, and he gave a brief speech where he mentions the giants in a manner that indicates they were common knowledge to the people of that time. His speech goes like this: When Columbus first sought this continent, when Christ suffered on the cross, when Moses led Israel through the Red Sea, nay, even when Adam first came from the hand of his maker, then as now, Niagara was roaring here. The eyes of that species of extinct giants whose bones fill the mounds of America have gazed on Niagara as ours do now. So it seemed to be just a matter of common belief then that these giants were in existence in the relatively recent past. Now, Flavius Josephus, he was a Jewish historian, and he wrote, this was way back shortly after Christ, so it was about 2,000 years ago. There were till then left the race of giants who had bodies so large and countenances so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. The bones of these men are still shown to this very day, unlike to any credible relations of other men. So we've got some old school references to the giants, but those were all just old knuckle dragging idiots. They didn't know what they were talking about. People were superstitious back then, right? We're a lot smarter than they were because we have knowledge now, and people are just stupid. They were less evolved, so they don't know what they're talking about. Fine. Well, let's look at some modern accounts. There are some really notable researchers, Jim Vieira and Hughes. Something Hughes, I think it started with an N, did a lot of research, compiled a number of published articles, often in newspaper articles, many by the published under the New York Times, of modern finds of these giant skeletons. Snopes will tell you that this is the result of a prank, an internet prank, or not really so much a prank as there was this contest for I guess graphic designers to see who could create the most realistic imagery of people unearthing giant skeletons. And that began to circulate around the internet, which would be classic disinformation. If there was a narrative you're trying to cover up, what you would want to do is dilute that pool of information with falsehoods so that you can say, see, that's what it really was. It was this competition, this graphic design competition. Whereas, and many of that is, when you look on the internet for this sort of thing, most of that is fake as a result of that competition. However, Newman and Vieira were not looking at pictures. They were looking at published articles throughout our relatively recent history. These you can see mostly in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And then they kind of inexplicably stop. But I mean, this happened in I've got it down here somewhere. I didn't mark it out. I probably should have. In Sauk Rapids, Minnesota. I used to live there. They found one there. I know right where it was, where the old dam came down, and that's where they usually make these discoveries when they're excavating and doing things like that. But I'll read at least a couple articles. They have compiled over 1,500 of them. This is not like somebody wrote an article for a gag. They used to find these things all over the place. The Evening News out of Hartford, Connecticut in 1901 published an article stating that an entire skeleton of an Indian giant has been dug up together with many other human bones, curious copper and stone implements, and crude ornaments. The thigh bone of the giant skeleton is twice as large as that of an ordinary man. So you could figure that to be about 12 feet tall. And I don't know about you, I'm really bad at estimating sizes, but 12 feet tall is about as tall as a house. Taller than like the lower eaves of a single-story house, typically. The Public Ledger of Janesville, Wisconsin in 1870 wrote, several days ago, as some laborers were digging a foundation for a barn on the grounds of Mr. Stanley in the town of Janesville, they unearthed a human skeleton of enormous size. It was found in a sitting posture and is in a fair state of preservation. The skull measured 32.5 inches in circumference and the thigh bones 44.5 inches in length. Dr. Towns said examined the remains shortly after they were exhumed and gave it as his opinion that when living, the man must have been not less than 13 feet in height. It was immediately sold for $10,000 in 1870. So interesting that that was purchased for what would amount to a couple years' wages immediately when it was discovered. So either there is some kind of underground collectors cabal, or I don't know, or uh, or there's some kind of institution that's very motivated to remove these from the public eye, so they bought them. And if you look into this Smithsonian, you'll see that that is just such an agency involved in removing these. So Genesis 6:4, the actual verse that I was referencing before, said there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And it's the book of Enoch that elaborates that 200 angels fell from heaven. They taught mankind things that men should not know, such as the making of weapons. The whole purpose is to destroy humankind. The elite believe that they were coming to free humankind and induct them into these secret mysteries. Um, this already covered with Gary Wayne. Gary Wayne, really good researcher. So I definitely recommend the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. This is a book called Giants and Dwarfs, written by E.J. Wood, compiling a number of similar finds or histories. This is a bit older though. This is from 1868, so not new information. Um, this is so I had the idea of compiling a bunch of these articles that I'm referencing, and right while I was doing that, so did David Paulides. If you're not familiar with David Paulides, you probably want to look him up too. He's the author of Missing 411 and documents many strange cases of these just very odd disappearances. Very odd, such as people going missing and it's right under somebody's nose, like they're there 1 second and then they're not. Later on during a search, um, they find a set of tracks in the snow. The boots are discarded. The tracks go on for like another 3 miles, and then all of a sudden they just stop and nothing. No place for the individual to like jump onto a rock and hide his tracks or jump to a tree. Nothing. There's just nothing. There's a lot of real accounts like that. So really good researcher, ex cop guy. So he decides to compile a book about these giant find articles at the same time as I did. His is, I guarantee it's better. I haven't read it. This is half-assed. That's why, when you put something on Amazon, it's got to be, you have to put a price to it. I try to keep it cheap. So I think this is $3.99. And it goes, I do kind of touch on my thoughts on what is going on, includes some of those references that I made with Lincoln's speech and everything. But what I really wanted to do is just find some articles, legitimate articles, and put them in there so that I can read them and really just reference them for myself, because I always found myself looking for these articles of these incredible finds from the internet and wanted to just kind of centralize it. But again, these are, I cross-reference a lot of these with Vieira and Newman's work. So um, generally, and I'm not going to speak for all of them, but authentic claims. A giant skeleton 18 feet tall, Friday, July 11th, 1919. One from the New York Times. Wisconsin mound open. Skeleton found of a man over 9 feet high with an enormous skull. That was 1897, New York Times. 1908, New York Times. Giant skeletons found. Skeleton of a giant found, New York Times, 1856. Giant skeletons found, again, New York Times, 1902. Find giant Indians' bones, New York Times, 1904. May be related to Cardiff giant. Find giant skeletons, giants' bones in mound. Indian skeletons found under Oklahoma mound. Um, I mean, these go on and on. Like I said, there's 1,500 plus. I barely have 100 in here, but it is it is interesting that we have all of these human origin stories echoing each other, and they all have to do with these godlike beings, angels, what have you. That's how I would reference them. Angels coming to Earth and creating a human hybrid progeny, and those being the origination point of these giants. So, slight tangent there. Set this aside. Um, Now, why does this matter when it comes to secret societies? Like I said, they think they are the gods. They think that they have that blood in them. It's running through their veins. That's why so many of these psychotic, just insane psychopaths are obsessed with bloodlines. That's why they interbreed and keep it in the family, because they want that blood pure. They don't want to dilute their fallen angel blood with dirty, pure human blood. They want to stay ahead of the curve and have that edge on their human counterparts. So, what does that have to do with today? I think when we look at Bible prophecy, the one that I always point to, because I think it's rather amazing, is prophesied in Isaiah thousands of years ago that Israel would become a nation in a single day, which doesn't happen. And then thousands of years later, after World War II, it happened in a day. And biblical prophecy seems to be fairly sound. When, in fact, I don't think that any has been disproven. I've seen it tried. I see people think that they have it, like, aha, I got it nailed. This proves it's all false. It's all fairy tales. And just a cursory look at the real information shows that, well, no, you didn't have it nailed at all. It's not been disproven. Still, after hundreds and actually thousands of years of people trying to do it, still can't do it. Um, so when we have Jesus saying 2,000 years ago that in the last days it's going to be the same as it was in the days of Noah, you have to wonder, what does that mean in the days of Noah? Well, what we know from the days of Noah is that this genetic corruption was going on. Humanity was almost bred out completely. And in order to prevent that from happening, the entire world had to be destroyed with a flood. And humanity, Noah's pure generations, as it said, had to be preserved in order for God to still see his plan through and have his family. And this is why we're so hated by that anti-human race, because God chose this as his family and this as his world. Now, if you're going by the Bible, heaven is not up on the clouds somewhere. Heaven is right here. The earth is remade. New Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, God's city, descends from heaven onto earth, and that's our birthright. Hence, Adam being made from the earth. So we're connected to this planet. This is our birthright, and it's trying to be usurped by that force. Now, also interesting to note that New Jerusalem descends from somewhere. It doesn't just manifest, it descends. When the Watchers fell, they descended as well and alighted atop Mount Hermon. When Jesus ascended, he went up. Well, where's up? Well, the sky. He didn't just stop there, though. He went up into space. Um, I find that interesting. You know that throughout Scripture and extra biblical Scripture, star and angel are used interchangeably. For example, it says a star fell from heaven. That star was Lucifer. that light bearer, um, an angel. So I'm not saying that the celestial bodies are actually angels. They are celestial bodies, but I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe it's a reference to realms or planets, not planets, so to speak, but stars that they inhabit. It's interesting that they use star and angel interchangeably. And so um, we have this connection to outer space all throughout history. People have worshipped uh, the Pleiades and the sun and the moon and this astrology stuff. Um, so there is something to it. There's something to outer space that we don't quite get. The occultists thought so. That's why they put NASA together. Um, that was a that was a coordinated effort by some of you guys are going to know better than I am. Um, but Jack Parsons, it was Jack Parsons, right, that founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, very renowned occultist, and from that, I believe, sprang forth NASA. Um, a lot of the conspiracy theorists say never a straight answer, which I think is funny. But anyway, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent. So the days of Noah, that's what Jesus said. When the end draws near, it's going to be like the days of Noah. What was going on in the days of Noah? This genetic corruption, trying to breed out humanity and inadvertently or advertently, actually, creating this race of genetic corruption, the giants. So, do we see giants now? No. So, that can't be what it means, the days of Noah. Um, but what we do see are hints of that. What they just did, this was a couple weeks ago, they made human animal hybrids legal. That's okay to do now. And I'm not a coincidence theorist. I don't think that it's coincidence that at that same time, we saw that Netflix put out a series about, I think it was a series or a movie. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it. Human animal hybrids. That's called soft disclosure. That's when, okay, we're going to change the world somehow, and we need the public to adapt to that. We can't have it just, we can't have it produce some this crazy shock value because um, that's going to set the people off. Now, all throughout these documents where they're kind of laying out the groundwork for what they're doing, if you're familiar with the SPARS document, with Lockstep, with Crimson Contagion. These are all these, or Event 201, drills they ran for what to do just in case there's this huge viral outbreak, a pandemic that spans the globe, which is, that's what pandemics do. But what do we do then? And then 2 months later, it actually happened. Well, in those documents, you'll notice if you were to actually read through them, they have a really strong focus on controlling human beings, the public's response to those things. How do we get people to, if you look at the NSSM 200, the plan to depopulate the world, as well as the UN's World Population Plan of Action, both from 1974 with a synonymous agenda, um, you see that same thing. You see a lot of time dedicated to we need to be careful so that we're presenting ourselves as benevolent. We're the good guys, even though we're talking about depopulating the world. We have to make sure they believe that we're the good guys. So they've got this strong focus on that, and that's the function of Netflix. That's the function of Amazon and the television and movies in general, and definitely of the mainstream media. Soft disclosure. We're going to prime you for this thing that's coming because we don't want you to flip your lids. So they literally made it okay to create human animal hybrids. Before that, we had the Human Animal Hybrid Prohibition Act of 2009. And that had kind of been the standard. But even that, though, when they do stuff like that, that's rules for thee, not for me. That means, okay, we're going to go underground with this stuff. Do you think they just cloned Dolly and said, all right, we're done. We did it. We cloned an animal. We're not going to try to apply this technology to human beings. Certainly wouldn't do that. Well, that's the purpose for any technology, is to apply it to human beings, to benefit humanity in some way. So, of course, the second they succeeded with Dolly, and probably even before that, they began trying to clone human beings. You know they did. Why wouldn't they? That's just insane to think that they'd be like, all right, we've come far enough. Technology and innovation doesn't work like that. So they came up with this Human Animal Hybrid Prohibition Act of 2009 to really limit that from the public. But the fact that they did it at all is evidence that, of course, it's within the realm of scientific possibility. And I think when we talk about human animal hybrids, a lot of people just can't. Um, they can't really grasp it. It's too much. It's too much for me. But they themselves are saying the technology is there. If I can find in here where I think I marked this out. Yes. All right. So from the book of Jasher, it says, "Then the sons of men began teaching the mixture of animals and one species with the other, in order therewith to provoke the Lord." Um, I don't know. This is all speculative, of course, but it's interesting to me that in these very enigmatic, esoteric sources, we see the mixture of human and animal DNA, as well as with the giants. And I should have expanded on that too. With the dinosaurs, it's been speculated that um, these fallen watchers were seraphim. Seraphim were a class of angels that had a reptilian countenance. And so the original Nephilim had they had a countenance. They didn't look like giants people. They were giants, but they had the countenance of a viper, and were fearsome to the eye and terrible to the ear, as Josephus would put it. So it's speculated that this fallen angel progeny also sought to create their own. They wanted not just to corrupt humankind, that DNA structure. They also wanted to corrupt animals and form them into the likeness of their own image, and that's why we have these dinosaurs. Um, Interesting to note, maybe not, that in order for fossilization to occur, rapid burial is required. So we have all these dinosaur skeletons buried all over the place. In order for a dinosaur or anything to fossilize, it has to be buried in mineral rich, water laden sediments so that when the flesh decomposes, before any scavenger animal could pick it apart, uh, the minerals take the place of the flesh, and that forms the structure of the fossil. So it has to be watery to prevent oxidation. We have to keep the oxygen off of the organic material, and there has to be sediment for it to take the place of the organic material. And so, what we have with something like a great deluge, this is not it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and that was enough to flood the whole world. What we what we have in Scripture is the floodgates, the subterranean floodgates opened up, and water burst forth from below. Now, modern uh, scientific discovery has shown us that they're now thinking that below the Earth's crust we have 3 times the amount of all the water contained in all the surface oceans. They think that because they found this mineral that only forms under great pressure in water. So under miles and miles of water, they dredged up a mineral from down there. And that was the conclusion they came to. So definitely enough water, subterranean water, to do something like that. Nothing different than a volcanic eruption, where magma is typically underground, but it erupts and now it's on the surface. The idea being the same thing happened with water. If that happened, then it was a tremendous amount of water. It blew up all over the place, and it would be very mucky, very sediment rich. And as those sediments began to when the water drained and what was left behind was the sediments, you'd have the heavier layers first, then the lighter materials, lighter, lighter, lighter. And that would create the strata that are now thought to represent millions of years. We also know from Mount St. Helens eruption that strata can form in a matter of minutes. It doesn't take millions of years. So just the kind of thing that you would expect when um, in a situation where you're finding these uh, dinosaur fossils all over the place, buried in this what is supposed to be strata, or whale carcasses found in the middle of deserts, or marine organisms found fossilized across on mountaintops across the globe. That's the exact kind of conditions that you would expect to create finds like that. I'd be hard pressed to come up with an explanation for all of that. Otherwise, although they have tried, I just don't think they're very good. Um, so it has been speculated that that is actually where the dinosaurs came from. That was the this seraphim race of angels, fallen angels, trying to pollute the animal life as well as human life, and so hence the flood. God wiped out all of that. That was antithetical to humans, which He created as His family and wanted to flourish. So again, anti-human this anti-human agenda from the beginning of history versus the pro-human agenda, which we're seeing today. So in the book of Jasher, the sons of men began teaching the mixture of animals of one species with another, in order therewith to provoke the Lord. Hendrik Poinar said, I laughed when Steven Spielberg said that cloning extinct animals was inevitable, but I'm not laughing anymore. This is going to happen. It's just a matter of working out the details. And from Tom and Nita Horn, the technology to resurrect extinct species already exists. The Pyrenean ibex, an extinct form of wild mountain goat, was brought back to life in 2009 through cloning of DNA taken from skin samples. Now, Tom Horn um, believes that. So he came upon this is a researcher. He's on Skywatch TV, and he came upon some interesting information when we originally invaded Iraq. Our troops went into the first thing they did was went to the museum in Iraq and began taking out all these artifacts. And I think it's speculated that they were removing a lot of these Nephilim bones. Um, so Tom Horn had that on his computer at home, stowed away, and you gotta look at his version of this because I don't want to botch it or mislead in any way. But I think essentially what happened is he had it on his computer and no one was at home, but that day his home burned to the ground because he was in possession of this intelligence that he wasn't supposed to have. Um, but at any rate, okay, we've got this technology to resurrect the Pyrenean ibex. We've already done that. There's been more than that too. I think a cow was brought back to life. Essentially, I think they did that in China. I don't know. Um, if they can do that, and they have this extraordinary focus on this Atlantean society and these demigods, which we see echoes of in other cultures too. Like that's what Hercules is. Hercules is the result of a a god having sex with a human woman. That's creating a demigod. That's what Hercules is. But anyway, they have this strong focus on this master race, which they believe themselves to be, which is um, a race of God people, essentially. What are the chances they wouldn't try to extract the DNA from those bones and resurrect their gods? Now, if you go by biblical scripture, it says that men's hearts are going to fail for fear of what is coming upon the earth. I can't think of many things that would do that, literally kill you with a heart attack. Maybe if I looked out my window and there was a 20-foot giant looking at me, that might do it. I'm not sure. There's a number of things it could be. But interesting now they have legalized human animal hybrids. Um, where did I put my thing? So here is something that I think is tying into this. This is an article from Emerging Life Sciences and Possible Threats to International Security, September 25th, 2020. It says biosecurity concerns range from resurrecting a virus like the causative agent of smallpox, increasing the lethality, duration, or case of transmission of microbiological agents, and developing novel delivery methods that avoid detection or can overcome preventative measures like vaccines and other therapeutics. More broadly, scientists are considering whether gene editing techniques like clustered, regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats, that's what CRISPR stands for, may enable capabilities that challenge nuclear weapons in terms of strategic ability. So, I'm going through a lot of these kinds of articles right now, and in very many of them, um, what I've read so far is that this had already been the plan to the transhumanist plan to alter the human genome, essentially to gain immortality. Here's another one. I'm not making this stuff up. Time Magazine, 2045, the year man becomes immortal. That's the goal. And they're looking at achieving that soon. And that sounds really good. But don't fall for it. This is something that they said, well, we this has been part of the agenda to begin with, but we thought it was going to be years off. Now, with the advent of CRISPR technology, they can do it, and it's happening faster than what they thought. Um, Faster than what legislation can keep up with. With this technology boom, especially with CRISPR, this is technology that anybody with a knack for this kind of thing, they can set it up and in their garage and tamper with gene editing. Very dangerous. And the boom of this sort of technology is so much so that legislation can't keep up with it. So all kinds of philosophical, ethical questions emerge when we're talking about bringing up these life forms or clones or synthetic life or AI or whatever. Are these considered human beings? If they're created in a lab, do they have rights? Do you own them? Is it okay to use their organs to benefit human beings? That's, of course, what the transhumanists will tell you. That's how they're going to try to sell it. But all those questions, the legislation can't keep up with the technology to determine the ethics of these things. They're just going to go for it. That was a very recent change that they said, okay, now we can go ahead and make human animal hybrids. I hope that doesn't happen too quickly. But I mean, look at these. So 2045, the year man becomes immortal. Of mice, men, and in between. Scientists want debate on animals with human genes. Evolution machine, genetic engineering on fast forward. M-Tech, get ready for a new human species. The technosapiens are coming. Journal of Lutheran Ethics, redesigning humans, the final frontier. Discover magazine, the most dangerous idea in the world. DARPA's new plans, crowdsource intel, edit DNA. Pentagon looks to breed immortal synthetic organisms, molecular kill switch included. Top Pentagon scientists fear brain-modified foes. Part human, part machine, transistor devised. The future of human species, part one. Um, so to say that the days of Noah is a reference to genetic tampering, I don't think is a stretch, especially, or making the claim that we're in the days of Noah. I don't think is a stretch in consideration of where the science is at and where this transhumanist movement is at. It's not far away. Um, so these people, when those skeletons are found, many people might want to know, well, why don't I see them today? Because when they're found, they're promptly removed. Many of these articles, they end with something like, And then the specimen was sent to the Smithsonian Institution for further examination, and that is the last that was seen of it. So they disappear. They're confiscated. And I think they're confiscated by Illuminists. And they're confiscated by the same people that have this secret mystery religion, the Egyptian Babylonian mystery religion, the same people that want a single language. That's part of Agenda 2030 because that's the part of the same cult. They want the same language. They want complete government control. They want a one world government, um, which brings to mind another prophecy of Christ that in the end, there's going to be a one world government, and you're not going to be able to buy, sell, or trade unless you believe the right things. Well, what are we seeing now? We are seeing a strong globalist push. Anytime you see a global catastrophe of some kind, that's usually the product of some kind of Hegelian dialectic, meaning they create the problem in the first place. Um, the people react to it, then they come up with the solution. And the point is that the solution was the plan all along. That's why they instituted the issue in the first place. In this case, in my opinion, a pandemic. So I think that that's what we are seeing. We're seeing this new world order push. Anytime you see a global threat, climate change, um, it's usually an invisible threat. This pandemic, it's an invisible threat. The only If your TV wasn't telling you every second of every day that there's a terrible, horrible pandemic out there, you would have no idea there is one. Life would go on as normal, and that's the way it should be because the death rate hasn't increased. We're seeing nothing more profound than a flu virus. I don't know if they now. There's been some recent discoveries about Fauci funding gain of function research in the Wuhan lab. So I think that is happening. I don't know if they wanted it to be more powerful and it just wasn't, but I do think that they have a plan for a second wave that is more powerful. But I forgot to say, I wanted to mention this too with this gene editing. Here's a danger. There's two different kinds of it. There's somatic gene editing, which affects mature cells in an organism and is not carried forward in future generations. But there's also germline editing, specifically aims to change the inheritable DNA that will be passed to an organism or a person's progeny. Human germline editing is banned in the United States and many European nations. However, good old China went ahead and pulled that off. So these two girls, I think it was two girls in China, um, were gene edited in this germline fashion. That means that whatever changes were made are passed on sexually. They're inheritable. Um, if you did somatic editing, then fine. That stays with you. It's not passed on. That's not really a danger to the human race. But if we're talking about germline editing, that can spread. Um, so that is a danger. So we see some of this genetic tampering emerging, and that idea of creating a super race is not. It's not a an old school kind of idea. It's current. It's something that's happening right now. They're still trying to create this Ubermensch. So let's see the vaccines. Is more evidence that we have. They, by Pfizer's own admission in their own studies, Pfizer is saying that this is um, this is the first time humans have been given mRNA, which modifies your gene structure to some point. And I'm getting into stuff I don't understand. I'm just repeating what I've heard. I don't like how close it comes to gene editing. Um, but that might have something with why these globalists are pushing it so hard. We also have the vaccine passport. That was supposed to be a conspiracy theory too. Well, it's definitely a thing, and it's being promoted more and more and more. And what do you need it for? Well, everything. So does this sound familiar? You're not going to be able to buy, sell, or trade, and there's going to be a new world order. I mean, this sort of stuff was prophesied about 2,000 years ago. So Jesus had had said this is going to happen. Um, if there's any question that are we in the days of Noah, if the days of Noah is a reference to genetic corruption, I think that list of articles right there kind of solidifies the deal. With the advent of CRISPR, I think we're definitely in that, and especially that coupled with the fact that they just now said that we're going to go ahead and make some human animal hybrids, um, gives me pause as well. So to recap, the days of Noah, we have pro-human God who has been twisted as kind of the aggressor, like I'm going to destroy planet Earth to get rid of humankind, when really it was the God is the pro-human force that wiped out this anti-human force that was trying to breed out humanity. So that's the days of Noah. In these modern times, we have the pro-humans versus the anti-human transhumanists, in my opinion. Um, they literally believe this is a religion. Make no mistake. Um, their belief is that they're going to achieve immortality and become gods. Actually, I got too many articles piled up there. They believe themselves to be gods. They're already saying that, which to me is a bit troubling. So these anti-human narratives we're seeing all over the place now. Pre-humans, or sorry, anti-human narratives. Carbon is bad. Well, carbon is central to life existing. So, but we're told carbon is bad. And that means humans are bad because humans leave a carbon footprint. Humans are a virus. They're overpopulating. They've been barking up that tree for ages now. There's too many people. They're a virus. They're a plague to the earth. Children are bad. I don't know if you saw that series of articles I read through. Children are dirty. Humans hurt the earth. Humans are dirty. They're contagious. We need to social distance. Part of me thinks that that was the whole plot behind this fake pandemic in the first place, is just to seed that idea that humans are stay away from humans, trying to kind of sever any human ties. And that's so we see the same principles. We see a pro-human force. We see an anti-human force, and that is where these secret societies are at. They believe that they are God men who literally have the blood of gods running through their veins. They were born to rule. Um, oh, okay. So let's talk about some of the. I won't go too much longer here. People got stuff to do. But so I was going to quote more from the Genesis 6 conspiracy. Central to all the primordial cultures was the famous mythological sea god Poseidon, who fathered 5 sets of scurrilous twins through sexual relations with the daughters of men. Poseidon was brother to the god Zeus, the god who overthrew the rebellious Titans. Poseidon's twins grew up to be giants, Titan demigods, who reigned over the mythological continent and civilization of Atlantis. Atlantis was, of course, the mythological civilization that most pantheistic cultures of antiquity linked themselves to as the source for their culture. What is most intriguing with the legends of Atlantis is that the Freemasons would like to recreate the Atlantean antediluvian age of enlightenment. That's key, which had 10 kingdoms with 10 governments and 10 kings, famous for being the helm of antediluvian world government. Freemasons fever to reincarnate world government, rebuilt with the Atlantean model of 10 kingdoms, where fallen angels had regular sexual relations with humans. This is the root doctrine to the Genesis 6 conspiracy. Um, More on that. The future world government and religion will partner to eradicate inferior humans who will be charged with holding back the balance of humanity from evolving into its so-called rightful plane of consciousness. When this transhumanist movement takes off, it's the people that refuse to be genetically altered that are going to be, it's just exactly as this says, who will be charged with holding back the balance of humanity from evolving. You are going to be a hindrance to the evolution of human beings. Therefore, you gotta go. It's not going to be they're not going to have to convince the people to chop your head off. You're going to be cheered to the gallows because you're going to be viewed as somebody who is prohibiting the evolution of humanity. Nazis conspired through eugenics to create modern Nephilim, branding it as the super Aryan white race that simmered in genetic manipulation. The Nazis co-opted Nietzsche's philosophy of the Superman into the notion of creating the new man. National Socialism was based in esoteric Rosicrucian doctrine that demanded the genesis to super beings, a new master race of supermen. This was the Rosicrucian Vril doctrine of Volkish ideology, where supermen are created through something special in the blood. The Vril Rosicrucian societies that included Hess, Haushofer, and Hitler believed Aryan super races came to Earth in the distant past. Does that sound familiar? It's just another version of the Nephilim. The Aryans are the Nephilim. Those are the gods that they want to recreate. And again, this is the Genesis 6 conspiracy from Gary Wayne. So what you see in these New World Order pieces of crap is they'll come out with their own. They can't help. They're so tied to it. They're enmeshed in this. This is their way of life. So it comes out in their language. If you pay attention to globalist allegory, you will often hear the phrase "a thousand points of light." What is the implication of this seemingly innocuous poetic prose George Bush Sr. exploited in one of his many illuminated and encrypted speeches to the world? A thousand points of light is an arcane metaphor symbolizing the promised thousand-year New Age reign of the Enlightenment introduced by the end-time religion and world government. The spark of the divine cannot be ignited unless the people of the world unite under the one world government in what Gnostics believe to be their true religion. And finally, just as the antediluvian epoch, the Nephilim Anunnaki seized kingship and power over the earth to maintain control over humans. The giants ensured they intermarried with all the early human post-diluvian kingships of Nimrod they did not already rule over. This ensured dragon blood would be inserted into all the nations and royal bloodlines of the earth, save the future Israelites who did not accept kingship until the reign of Saul and David. It is for this reason that Rex Deus desperately endeavors to graft its bloodlines into the only kingship that is pure of Nephilim blood, the Davidic inheritance and the messianic inheritance of Jesus. This dragon doctrine of subjugation against the mundane mortal humans is and always was the same, just as it resurfaced in World War II under the Nazis. Unless humanoids possess dragon blood, they are perpetually considered inferior and subordinate beings by the posterity of giants, useful only for servants and slaves to do mundane toil for their superior brethren of dragon status. It will be this way again in the tribulation period. So just some foresight from Gary Wayne. All right, so I know that getting into giants is a sure way to chase people away. But again, it doesn't matter what you believe. They believe in it. And quite honestly, there's quite a lot of evidence for the mysterious etiology of humanity. And it's not what we've been told. It's not. The narratives that we've been given are um, they're to lead us farther away from that and induct us into this realm of strict materialism that is that nothing exists but matter in all its forms and functions. To really, in essence, dumb us down under the guise of making us intellectuals. So it's funny how that works. I think um, the pursuit of these intellectual doctrines that are considered intellectual anyway really lead to more ignorance. So it's a counterintuitive thing. Um, I noted some other things here, but I don't know that they really necessarily tie in. Um, this kind of does. This explanation of Gnosticism. The Gnostic theosophist dogma of messengers slash prophets sent to every generation and every people is a clever manipulation that craftily perverts the true doctrine of messengers from God Most High. These purported polytheist prophets of false gods and Satan are intermixed with authentic prophets such as Moses, Abraham, Muhammad, and Jesus in corrupting the monotheist message of God's messengers. This intermingling's design is to confuse and persuade the ignorant and the naive that a combination of polytheism, Gnosticism, and theosophy is the true religion of the world. Gnostics tend to place inordinate importance upon genealogies. It is a distinguishing and acknowledged mark of Gnostic literature that expresses Gnostic sense of identity and loyalty through complex genealogical myths of origin. So I think what we have with this ruling elite is essentially an undercurrent of Gnosticism. The Illuminati is a real thing. I probably don't have to tell this audience that. It's a surreptitious Luciferic organization founded on May 1st, 1776 in Ingolstadt, Bavaria by the rebel professor of canon Adam Weishaupt, a prominent Mason. The primary goal of the Illuminati is to bring about the New World Order. The second goal is to utterly destroy Christianity via their own religion of mysticism, likely through Gnostic infiltration of Christian churches. The Illuminati realizes Christianity must be reeled in before world government and the universal religion can take hold. And then Freemasonry. Freemasonry is merely a fraternity within a fraternity, an enigma wrapped within a riddle, outlining or utilizing an outer organization designed to conceal an inner brotherhood of powerful modern potentates known as the elect or adepts. The outer fraternity, which includes the lower levels of an initiation, is the visible fraternity society promoting business and good causes. The inner fraternity is the arcane or snake brotherhood dedicated to the esoteric mysteries of ancient Egypt and beyond. So um, that snake brotherhood, as they and there's a chapter on the snake brotherhoods to make more sense of that. But essentially, you can trace it back to the same general ideas. Essentially, um, Satan or Lucifer is essentially the good guy, and I know there's a lot of people that make a distinction between Satan and Lucifer. Again, that's a Gnostic idea. Um, it depends what your belief system is. Um, Lucifer fell from heaven. Lucifer is called Satan or that old serpent. Now, when Eve was talking to this Nakash in the Garden of Eden, it wasn't a snake on its belly or a snake wrapped around a tree. It was, they say, of course, as I said, that the seraphim were had a reptilian countenance. They were serpentine in their form. And I don't know if the same follows for cherubim because I don't know if it's one of those things like a cherub is a seraphim, but a seraphim isn't necessarily a cherub, or I don't know. I don't know angels. I haven't studied angels. But I think that's what we're dealing with really at the core of it. And again, that's what Albert Pike says. That's what when you really explore this mysticism, it always ends with Satan is good, really God's the bad one. You had it wrong all along. Meanwhile, if you just look at the origin stories, there is a force that is pro-human, and it's not Lucifer, it's not the light bearer, um, it's God, and that's who you have to go to if you want to uh, survive this. Well, you're not going to survive anyway. I got bad news for you. You're going to die regardless. We always were. So um, I might be kind of weird in this way, but uh, I that's something that actually kind of gives me solace. It's like, you get so worked up about, well, they're probably going to exterminate us all, but in the end, that was your fate, regardless. So, um, better to stand up and go out with a fight than to lay down and just do what you can to spread the truth. The most important thing is what happens on the other side. You're going to die anyway, so that doesn't matter. Now, if there's nothing more out there, that doesn't matter. You're gonna wink out and fade into nothingness, and who cares? But if that's not the case, then it's far more important that you see to it that your side, the other side of eternity, is secured. Because I can tell you, you want your eternity to be with that pro-human force, the force that made you in the first place, to be a part of his family. And if you're not there, then guess what? You're with the other side, and that's where you're going to be. And it's not that. I don't even necessarily want to say it's a punishment, but it's a decision to separate yourself from that pro-human force, from the only thing that gives you meaning and actually makes you special. Because without without God giving you meaning, without God saying you're special to me, making you special, you are just dust. You are just dust, and you're going to go back to dust, and you don't have any worth, and you do mean nothing. The only way you mean something is if you have worth imbued unto you from Him, and that's really what we should be concerned about. Um, so when it comes to doing something like altering your human genome irrevocably, I would say maybe don't do that. Humanity is God's family. That's the way He made it. So if you want to not be a human, that means you can't be in that family. Um, that's just the way it is, and that's not to say I don't have this figured out either. I don't know that just because you do some kind of a maybe you were to take a shot and that messes with your DNA a little bit, that's enough to irrevocably change your genetic structure so that, well, technically you're not a human anymore. I just don't believe that. I think that it's going to be something that a little bit more deliberate and overt. However, I think that there is a lot more um, to these ancient scriptures, that this is not just something that can be done away with because, oh, that's old mythology. We're in modern times now. It doesn't factor in. It does factor in. There is nothing new under the sun. It's just a repeat of what we've seen before. And so um, be aware. And you don't have to be afraid, I don't think. I get accused of being afraid all the time. Like, well, you're just why are you worrying about this stuff? Why are you fretting? Well, I'm not really fretting. I'm saying the same thing. I'm trying to echo what Jesus said. Be aware of this stuff. When you see it coming, run for the hills. I think a lot of people have this impulse that's been festering in them to literally do just that. It's probably just because your spirit is awake, where you have this desire to, maybe you're just sitting and letting your thoughts wander, and they just go to, I wonder if it would be a good idea to sort of find a little cabin in the woods somewhere and get away from this. Um, a lot of people are feeling that way now. A lot of people are apologizing to doomsday preppers because now they're feeling it too. The preppers were just ahead of the curve. They saw it coming a little bit ahead of time, and and the rest of us are catching up. So um, know their game plan. By the way, it's good to be familiar with their documents. It's good to know what they're planning, because if you do have that impulse to flee, as Jesus himself directed, um, but at the right time. I don't want to say, yeah, you got to get out there and do it now. I don't know that that's the case. But if you feel that impulse, you want to know what you're preparing for. Are you going to go get a cabin in the woods? Do you have a bug out location, but it's 4 hours away? What if there's a lockdown? You need to know what they're saying. They're saying that a part of this is going to be climate lockdowns, and they're going to take control of infrastructure. They're going to block transportation so that you're not going to be able to drive 4 hours. Every cop on the road is going to be pulling over every non-commercial vehicle. So your bugging out plan is not going to work. Um, for example, now I'm saying that's in their literature. I'm not saying that's how it's actually going to come to pass because they can't predict the future either. But another thing they're talking about is massive, widespread drone surveillance. I would have to imagine they'd have some kind of what do they call it? Infrared heat seeking technology, so that you could live in a cabin in the woods, but one drone going high enough in the sky, and they probably don't even need drones. They can probably do it with satellites, but just one of them can see probably, I don't know, a 5 mile radius at least, depending on how good their technology is. And so, are you going to want to do something where you're still visible from the air, or do you want to um, maybe pile some sod on your roof so that if they do have any kind of ground or um, I don't know, penetrative radar, that there's a less chance that they'd be able to spy you from there. So again, good to know what they're. This is a technocracy coming. They want complete technocratic control. They want to really draw everyone into the grid, and they don't want you to be able to survive without the internet. And so they want to make that widespread as well. They're not going to make it easy. But here's what I hear from a lot of people that are really gung ho about prepping. Some have a history with uh, military backgrounds, or they're outdoorsmen and they've hoofed it in the woods for, I don't know, months at a time. Or you have to have really special knowledge. You basically have to be a Navy SEAL to be able to make it on your own. No, you don't. Homeless people do it all the time. Um, it's not something that is, you don't have to have special abilities. All you have to do is have the will to live. I was talking to somebody who was homeless for a number of years, and um, a, a, a concern of mine is being living in the Midwest. Um, I mean, it gets 20 below, you're going to freeze to death. I don't know how anybody would survive a winter like that. But she said, "Oh yeah, me and my boyfriend did. We were homeless, and in Minnesota, lived under a bridge for a year, and just had a lot of blankets. We made it work." Um, there are people. There's this guy running from the law that basically dug a hole in the side of the hill, in the side of a hill, and he lived there for like 4 years, just scavenged, and he made it work. You don't have to be a Navy SEAL. Um, when it when it hits the fan, do what you got to do, but you don't have to be intimidated by that. Get to safety. And you can stay alive for. I saw this documentary where this person went into the woods to kill themselves by starvation, and I don't know anything about the person, how much fat they had on them or anything like that, what else they did, but they kept a journal of it. So they made this obscure documentary about it, and going over these journal entries, and the guy wrote down every day, tracked his progress, and took him like 50 days to die. So, get some food stores and everything, but we are resilient beings. So you can definitely make it work. I know that's been kind of a tangent. I'm sorry about, I'm guessing lives are supposed to be probably more interactive than this was, but I can't talk and read at the same time. But I'm seeing a lot of interesting. I'm sorry for everybody that your comments that I missed. Again, I'm going to post this to YouTube, so please post your comments. If I didn't get to you, go on YouTube and post them there, so that maybe we can open up a discussion there. I'm at Deconstructing a Paradigm on YouTube, so we will hopefully continue it there. Um, Thank you, Spidey. Very nice words from Spidey. Um, Nephilims have 6 to 7 fingers. Yes, they have. You'll see this today too, polydactyly, and That's recorded in the ancient scriptures as well. That's a common trait. They didn't all, or many of these finds don't have 6 fingers and toes. However, um, that's common. Double rows of teeth, as I saw also mentioned on here, um, and even horns. There is a number of. I'll read through some of those. Oh, thank you for subscribing. I appreciate that. To Rainbow Phoenix and Sarasita. Am I saying that right? I appreciate that as well. My son was born with 12 fingers, and a lot of my family too. Yeah, that's definitely a thing that still happens. Let me see if I can find. I entered a few writings. Um, this is my first version of deconstructing a paradigm. I had to make some updates, not many. It's basically the same book. And then when I tried to I changed my name too, and now it doesn't even matter. But so now it's under Robert K. Williams, but I couldn't find the same cover art, so that's why it looks different. Um, Indian giant. Oh, this is double rows of teeth. So this is from A Large Man Unearthed in Massachusetts as recorded by Charles Gilbert Hind in 1908. Some 15 years ago, the skeleton of an Indian giant in almost perfect preservation was dug up in the same locality, Cedar Tree Neck. The bones indicated a man easily 6 feet and a half, not very tall, actually, in giant terms, possibly 7 feet high. An unusual feature was a complete double row of teeth on both the upper and lower jaws, from Charles Gilbert Hind in 1908. On page 338 of the History of the Town of Rockingham, Vermont, 1908, Lyman Simpson Hayes records, when the earth was removed from the top of the ledges east of the falls, a remarkable human skeleton, unmistakably that of an Indian, was found. Those who saw it tell the writer the jawbone was of such a size that a large man could easily slip it over his face, and the teeth, which were all double, were perfect. Um, That is on double rows of teeth. About the horns, let's see. I put something down here about the horns. I just don't know where it is. Double rows of teeth are not the only strange comorbidities associated with the giants. More than a few have been found with 6 digits on their hands and feet, as is described in the Bible, and several have been found sporting a set of horn-like protuberances extending forth from the skull. By the way, if that runs in your family, that does not mean you're a Nephilim. Um, And even if it means there's some kind of a remnant, that could be, I don't know. This is, again, above my pay grade. Maybe that is some kind of a Nephilim remnant. That doesn't mean um, that you've got the the requisite proportion of altered DNA in your body to that would negate your humanness, is what I'm trying to say. Um, okay, so horn-like protuberances. In 1898, the Hocking Sentinel in Toledo, Ohio reported workmen in the employ of the Ferguson Construction Company excavating for the Toledo and Ottawa Beach Railroad a little beyond the city limits of Toledo, Ohio, unearthed 3 skeletons, evidently relics of some great race, as they were about 7 feet in length. Just where the ears should be on the head are singular bony protuberances which curl forward. The finds were made in solid yellow clay about 8 feet below the surface. The cut is through a large mound, not half of which has yet been torn up. Several bone tomahawks of large size have been picked up in the locality. That is from the Hockington Sentinel in Toledo, Ohio, 1898. In 1959, a horned skull was sent to the Museum of Supernatural History to be examined, as it was suspected to be a hoax. Their examiners concluded, although we thought that the object had been cleverly manufactured, analysis has demonstrated that the horns are genuinely part of the skull. An in-depth examination and x-rays leave no room for doubt. The skull is not a forgery. So, now, I don't know why this should be that difficult to believe either, because um, I think they're called cutaneous horns or something like that. But it's a thing. Like I remember seeing it on Ripley's Believe It or Not. I think it was a Chinaman had a horn growing out. There's people with horns growing out of their head. These sound a little bit different because it's not a random growth. It's almost like um, it's a little bit more genetically programmed than that. It's horns coming out of the sides of their heads. And you might have seen the imagery of this on the internet as well. And of course, relegated to the arena of fiction and fantasy, but maybe there's more to it. I mean, we have these professional researchers doing an analysis on these specimens and concluding that they're authentic. So far be it for me um, to contradict the skeptics, although that's often what I do, but just using the argument of expertise in my favor this time, I suppose. It's like dragons. Some believed dragons did exist. Interesting you mentioned that. Um, there are. I just bought a book on that actually. I just haven't read it yet. Um, and I imagine it's going to present evidence for dragons. But when you look at the Leviathan in the Bible, we've got a large creature, or is that the behemoth? I think it's, I don't know. Um, the description is very dragon-like. If I recall correctly, it's smoke billowing out of the mouth and everything. I'm not 100% on that. I'd have to read it again. I believe that is in the book of Job. They found creatures like Leviathan. Yeah, the description of Leviathan is pretty impressive. I think Behemoth and Leviathan are in Job. I'm not 100% sure. Blue Jacket says it's Leviathan. So and I know how crazy that sounds too. But when you think about it, um, look out your window and picture a T Rex walking through the, well, I guess it's trees and out my window or down the street. Um, and yet we have some evidence that those gargantuan reptilian creatures did exist. Um, I don't I don't necessarily think dragons are much more crazy than the existence of dinosaurs, personally. But speaking of scripture, another thing that Christ warns about is that men will seek death and be unable to find it. That's hard to make sense of, isn't it? It is without transhumanism. I mean, are there no cliffs to jump off of? Is there no ocean to drown yourself in? Are there no sharp objects you can slit your throat with? How can you want to seek death and not be able to find it? But it does start to make sense when you look at it in the context of transhumanism, when we have current research circulating around creating a superhuman, creating nanobots that can repair cell damage just as fast as it happens. That might um, create a scenario where you would want to die but be unable to. Another thing these people are talking about is uploading human consciousness into um, into the internet, basically. And I don't know who the hell would want that. Um, that was actually the fate of the Watchers, actually the Nephilim um, from the Book of Enoch. part of what God's message was to these watchers is that you're going to watch your children die, which were the Nephilim, which were evil. So um, good riddance. But it says they will be called demons. So the demons would be the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, and they'll search. They'll be disembodied, but they'll still have the lusts of the flesh. They'll hunger, they'll thirst, and so they'll seek bodies to be able to satisfy that, but have none to do it with. Well, if you're going to upload your consciousness into the internet or something like that, put yourself on a jump drive or however the hell that works, you're consigning yourself to the same fate. That would be the dumbest thing in the world, to have your consciousness carry on without a body. I don't know why you would do that. Like, yeah, I want the same fate of the giants, the disembodied Nephilim. That's what I want for my life. Oh, this is probably pretty boring. I should probably do something other than sit and read. I just like your guys' input so much. Anyway, I'll probably wrap this up. So I appreciate you being here. And again, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop on my YouTube, my recording that I'm going to upload to YouTube. If I know I missed like everyone's comments in the first like hour and a half of this, so if I missed you, go ahead and comment on deconstructing a paradigm once I get this uploaded, which I'll do tonight, and we can continue it there. So again, thanks for being here, and I don't, you know what? I'm bad at technology. The address, I think I'm the only deconstructing a paradigm. That's what my channel is called. So um, find me on deconstructing a paradigm. I made my little icon the same as on TikTok, um, so that I'm easier to find. And I know I saw a lot of great input on here. So um, let's do it that way. And I will try to be sure to make sure comments are enabled. All right. Again, thank you all and have a super awesome Saturday. Glad I asked you to do this. Yeah, actually, I'm doing this because of you. Stacy, I hadn't really considered it. So um, I don't know. I'll probably do it again if I can find some idea of what to talk about. Truth be told, I'm a fairly reticent individual. I don't do a lot of talking. Kind of takes me a while to get going, and then sometimes when I get going, I don't shut up. Um, but yeah, I'm sure I'll find something to blab at you about eventually. All right. Is there a stop button on this thing? I don't know how to